Okay, so the last thing we'll do in this section, the last thing we're going to do this year, we're going to look at the reciprocal functions of our angles. And so let's just remind you that the secant of an angle is the reciprocal of the cosine. So if I'm talking about cosine on our unit circle, is that adjacent or x-coordinate, then we're just going to need to take the reciprocal of that. And the cosecant is 1 over the sine. Let's see, so this is going to be 1 over the adjacent. I'm going back up here to kind of redefine. So that's going to be 1 over the x-coordinate. And then the sine, 1 over the sine would be 1 over whatever that opposite side's length was. And the opposite side is always going to be the y-coordinate. And then for our cotangent, we remember that it is 1 over the tangent. But now we've defined the tangent as sine over cosine. So let's flip that or take the reciprocal. It's going to be cosine over sine, which is our x-coordinate over our y-coordinate. And that's just in general about our reciprocal functions. So now let's talk about the angle they give us of 135 degrees. So this is 0 degrees, and this is 180 degrees, and 135 is actually smack dab in the middle of quadrant 2. So because I know this is 135, we're in quadrant 2, let's talk about which of these are going to be positive and which ones will be negative. So my unit circle is going to come around here, and it's going to intersect with this terminal side at some ordered pair here. Well, that ordered pair has a negative. This is my adjacent, which is my cosine, and which is a negative x-coordinate. Right? So for this angle, I'm going to have a negative cosine, which means I'll have a negative secant. So I'm going to write negative up here. And then this ordered pair has this vertical, we call it the opposite of that reference angle here. Put in my little alpha here, which is 45 degrees. Away from 135 is 45 from 180. So 45 degrees is my reference angle. Here's the opposite side. And we've now come together. The opposite is the same as the sine, and the sine is the same as the y-coordinate. Well, notice that from my origin, I went left, which gave me a negative x-coordinate, and then I go up, which gives me a positive y-coordinate. So my cosecant, which is the reciprocal of my sine, is going to be positive. The sine or y-coordinate is positive, so my cosecant will also be positive. Because the cotangent is going to be a negative cosine divided by a positive sine, negative divided by positive is going to be negative. I'm just going to write that in this color here. Those are going to be the positive and negative characteristics of these three reciprocal functions based on which quadrant it's in. So because this is a unit circle, and that tells me that my radius is 1, which gives me a hypotenuse of 1. So this is going to be, find a different color. There we go. This is going to be a radius of 1. And so it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So the factor that we're dealing with is square root of 2, and 1 divided by the square root of 2 So this is going to be a negative 1 divided by square root of 2. And then if we were to rationalize that, you guys remember multiplying by square root of 2 over square root of 2 would give me square root of 2 over a nice whole 2. But I want us to focus, we're just going to leave it like this for now. These are equivalent. I just haven't, sorry about that, haven't rationalized this denominator yet. Okay, and then because it's a 45, 45, 90, it's an isosceles triangle, so my my sine is the same as my cosine. Now, again, we've already decided that the sine is going to be positive because the y-coordinate up here is positive. So I'm going to, again, just say that it's going to be 1 over the square root of 2. We could rationalize it, but you'll see why I'm not going to bother in just a second. So here's my sine, positive 1 over square root of 2. Cosine is negative 1 over square root of 2. Let's go back to secant, cosecant, and tangent. So for the secant, right, it's related to this cosine, so I'll do it in green. So the secant of 135 degrees is going to be 1 over the cosine. So that's just the reciprocal of this. So it's going to be negative square root of 2 over 1, which is just negative square root of 2. And then the cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, so I'm going to flip this fraction for the cosecant of 135. I'll flip this, is going to be square root of 2 over 1, which we know is square root of 2. It's positive sine this, so it's positive cosecant. And then my cotangent, all right here, cotangent of 135 degrees, we know now that it's going to be the cosine over the sine, so the cosine over the sine, these are the same value, only negative over positive, so it's a negative, right? We already determined it's a negative cotangent. Anything divided by itself is going to be 1. So because my cosine and my sine had the same number, right? When you divide a number by itself, it's going to give you a 1. Negative divided by positive is negative. But we're going to do that one more time. So we're going to come up here. And you remember, let's pull this down a little bit, see if we can see what we already have here just for definitions of secant, cosecant, and cotangent. So let's figure out where this angle is. So we can do the math and change it into a degree measure if we want. And that would be, let's do this in degrees, it's going to be, again, pi is 180, divided by 4 is 45, times negative 10 is negative 450 degrees. Well, that's going in the opposite direction. So that's negative 360, right? And so we've got to go another 90 degrees, right? So we've got to go another 90 degrees to get to negative 550. So the terminal side of that angle is going to be here on my negative y-axis. So I'm not going to be able to draw a reference triangle like I did up here because I can't draw a perpendicular to the x-axis and create a triangle. So here's what I need to do. I need to think about that unit circle that goes through my terminal side, and I just want to think about what its x-coordinate and y-coordinates are going to be. So the x-coordinate, notice from my origin I didn't go right, I didn't go left, so the x-coordinate is 0. And then for my y-coordinate I went down. Because it's a unit circle, I went down 1, so negative 1. And by now we've generalized that the x-coordinate's going to be my cosine, the y-coordinate's going to be my sine, and I'm going to go back to these definitions that I have up here, right? So the secant of this angle, negative 10 pi over 4, is equal to the reciprocal of this cosine. Well, the cosine is 0, so 1 over 0 is a problem. Anytime you try to divide by 0, we have an issue. This is undefined, and it has no numerical value. So there is no secant for this particular angle. We say that it's undefined. Now notice how that changes when we talk about cosecant and cotangent. So the cosecant of this angle is 1 over the sine, which is -1. And so 1 divided by -1 is simply -1. And then the cotangent of this angle is equal to, and remember, we've defined cotangent now as cosine over sine. And so the cosine is 0, and the sine is -1. 0 divided by anything other than 0 is going to have a value of 0. I want you to notice the difference between when we're dividing by 0 when it's in the denominator, it's undefined. If we're dividing 0, 0 is in the numerator, and we're dividing by any other number, it's got a value of 0. So this cotangent has a value of 0. The cosecant doesn't really exist. We say it's undefined. And that is that.